When you get your documents, it should be 3 per person. You should have the object ID, information about my services, and also the 8283 that we've talked about. Preserving your visual legacy. First of all, I am the appraiser, and I work in conjunction with the people that you see here, the lawyer, the institutions that accept donations, and also another and very important part of my work is with accountants. As donors, generally, you are guided in some way by legacy. I want other people to share. I was able to have this. I want other people to share in it. I want it to be shown to future generations. So I want to donate it to an institution so that I am a part of the voice that is witness to the objects in which is part of our culture. My position is I do documentation. I don't create anything. I am just a documenter of all information and a liaison between the donor and the government. And particularly in this case, the government is the IRS. So, I do not do any donation appraisals without first getting consent from the institution that you're going to donate to. In the past, we were able to just, you said, I want to donate something, I do the appraisal. Sometimes people would fill in who they gave it to. Maybe they gave it to them a year later. That is no longer allowed. Congress is very careful. I'm governed by Congress through the Appraisal Foundation. Congress is very interested in what happens in the appraisal world. As an appraiser, I do personal property, which ends up being art. However, there's a bigger scope of things, and that is real estate appraising. The markets and the recession that we're dealing with now in the 1980s, when we had the S&Ls that went under, a lot of that was caused by appraisers. Overvaluing, undervaluing properties, and not giving proper valuations, which ended up with people believing that their properties were worth more than they were. The government doesn't take this lightly because you're taxed on these properties, and they have tightened up the requirements. In last year alone, I was with the IRS for 5 different occasions for 2 to 3 days on each of those occasions, so that we all understand as appraisers what the penalties are if we overvalue your art or your property. The penalties are, if we're off 10%, we can go to jail for 10 years. So, and in my organization, as she said, I had been the president of my chapter. We have 250 appraisers, and 10 of them are in jail. So, they are serious. And why are they serious? Because part of the background of it is, a lot of people used to donate in the past, were very wealthy people, the Mellons, the Rockefellers in this time. But now, the in quote, middle class, or the emerging rich, creates a lot more volume. And so it's a lot more taxable assets. And the government, of course, is going to make sure that they get a part of that asset base. So this is one of the reasons they do it. And plus, this is an area that's very easy to have fraud. There's companies like Enron, you heard about them, and Tyco. The government highly regulates us and then don't regulate us. It's kind of an interesting place. They keep us in a gray area because it's what they call the soft reach. They allow for you to make mistakes, and then they come after you using those mistakes. In the case of Tyco, the gentleman was purchasing art from a New York gallery and saying that they were being sent to his Connecticut home. Instead of them going to his Connecticut home, they went across town to his New York flat, bypassing New York state taxes. So when they went after him for that particular problem, that's what we call the soft reach. Once they started with him with that, they can take all of your information and all your other asset categories, your businesses, your personal information, and go through that. So they kind of almost purposely leave this area in that gray so that they have that reach. This is one of the places that they do that. I am a witness for the object. Even though you hire me or the institution may hire me, I am really not swayed by people on either side. I am swayed by the object. I can only pay attention to that. So a lot of times when I'm doing work, it's like, I think it's worth this, I know that it's sold for this in this market. You know, that's all very interesting, but there's methodology that we have to do to confirm what we're required to do, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I am the liaison between the donor and the government. A lot of times, we're going to start with the on-site cataloging. A lot of times institutions are small and they don't have people on site once you make the donation to do the cataloging. If they have someone on site, then the museum will give me the information and I will work from their information because they are the experts. I am not an expert in the art. I am an expert in valuation. So if the museum has staff, then they will give me the information and I will work from that information. I would include them in my report that they're the ones that furnish that information and that I work from there. However, a lot of small museums or HBCUs do not have anybody on staff to do the cataloging. So we will go on site and do the cataloging. We use the Getty ID, which is your first handout, object ID checklist. And you can see, actually, it's very similar to what Larry gave you as the inventory list. But this is kind of the official thing that we use, that's been used in the museum world for a long time, so appraisers use it too. Some of the things that you'll note about it, it says distinguishing features, damage, repairs. Now, I do African art, so that can have a different meaning from damage and repairs to, say, your print. First of all, the damage and repair, damages to paper is one of the worst or hardest to remedy. So you have to be actually more careful of paper than you do like of canvas. But if it's African art and it was repaired in Africa, the closest it is to the hands that made it, the less the value is devalued. So there's a lot of criteria for the way we look at these distinguishing features. So if it was broken and it was repaired here by someone, that does take away from the value for the African art. But if it was repaired in Africa with those staples that they use or some nail they found, then that doesn't deter from the valuation. So there's a lot of things to look at. In the African art in particular, title or the maker is generally not known except for the contemporary African art. Testing. Usually testing is quite expensive in the African art, thousands of dollars, and a lot of people do the testing if they have some other documentation that generally is a picture of the person holding the piece with, say, the chief in 1930. So, particularly in African art, I usually look at the pieces as under 100 years old. And even under 200 years old in Africa, that's not considered ancient. Where for American art, of course, that would be considered old. But these are the kind of things that, that we look at, the type of object, what the material is made of. We're very concerned about materials that are organic, which may have the bugs crawling out of them, or ants eating away. What kind of other markings are on them to help to identify. All of these things are very important because even the size, dimensions, a lot of people try to give dimensions like the frame or the matted area. That is not a concern for us as appraisers. We're concerned about the size of the actual piece. Because when people make copies or do fraud, they generally or may not do the exact dimensions. But if I look back in the catalog raisonné for Jacob Lawrence and I see that the piece was supposed to be 23 by 14, and yours is beautiful, but it's 40 by 30, takes up the whole living room. You know, you're loving it, but this is not proper. So I started the whole investigation as to why the dimensions are off. So again, you can take a look at this, and with Larry's inventory sheet, this is a tool for you to use. Okay, research for the fair market value. I'm going to put on your valuation for charitable donation, which is quite a different valuation from your insurance replacement. What's called the fair market value. That value is determined, again, by the government. I'm going to talk about the 8283, but if you go online, you can download the instructions for Form 8283. And you can see it's quite a lot to read, but I will read every part of it. But I wanted to read the definition. Fair market value is the price of a willing, knowledgeable buyer would pay a willing, knowledgeable seller when neither has to buy or sell. Convoluted, man it? Okay, but what the government really is saying and what they really want, which has been an issue for the African American art for quite some time now, what they really want is auction prices. Why do they want auction prices? Because it's the only thing they can see and know that's documented in a public way that is a sure this is what is sold for in the market. At a gallery, the gallery may say overstate the value, not include the discounts, add on the frames. It's something, of course, that's oral, or even if they write it, it's depending on the integrity of the gallery owner or the dealer. The government doesn't really like this. They want the auction because it is public pricing. So that makes Swan's auction, and you know, I know that there's been talk around Swan's auction, but as an appraiser, it has been a dream come true for me, the Swan's auction. It at least even gives me a base that if it's undervalued at Swan's, because on that date, I won't call it undervalued, if it is bidded low and purchased low, I still can at least start with the low bid and build a narrative around, wow, this was a day it rained, and this piece really would go for this, and this artist is this, you know, but I can write to a defense for a higher price, but I need to start somewhere. So one of the problems even with Swans is we still can only get so many artists per auction. So we're still not bringing to auction. I was standing by David Driscoll about 3 or 4 years ago, and he was looking like weepy, and he said, wow, I'm at auction. I was like, this is your first auction? And it was. So many of our artists have never been to auction. So it is important that what Swan is doing, and it is important that we find or have other auction houses that enter into this market so that we can have more pricing, more references for pricing. I am USPAP compliant, and what does that mean? That means I follow the standards as given by the U.S. government. And this is the standards. Yes, and we use every bit of this, but particularly for personal property appraisers, we use standards 7 and 8. And that's the development of the project and the reporting of the project. The development of the project, as with my colleague here, it's very important for us to get the answers to the questions we ask. Because specifically we need to know, who is this for? Who owns this piece? We need a lot of information before we even start the project. So that is the development. That's the standard 7. Developing and making sure that you are the proper donor. We have so many people who their aunt died and they went in the house and they cleaned the house out and it was in there. So now they want to do something with it. You may not have, well, I cannot deal with you until Larry or someone says, this is the appointed person, and that I can deal with them. Otherwise, and that's why I like it to go through the process first before it gets to me. and that you have worked through, and they have done that part, and I can just go ahead and do what I'm supposed to do, which is the appraisal. If somehow you forget, you miss the process, I will walk you through it and walk you backwards through this process, because I take no responsibility or liability for this part of the process. After we develop the intended user, which institutions the pieces are going to go to, then I present the report. The report is generally 17 to, could be up to 150 pages. We've gone that far, depending on the piece that you're getting. The most important thing that I found, though, with donation is this. Most people have not talked to their family about their intentions. A lot of people haven't thought about their intentions. You have this wonderful art, and it's without a plan. I think that everybody needs a strategic plan about the art that they have. If you really don't care, then make that known and give it to Goodwill. But otherwise, you need to talk to your family, because you'll find too, we get into so many family fights. I'm in court a lot with families who've been fighting 7, 8 years over a piece that was $20,000, and now you pay lawyers, me, and all the people sitting in court like $50,000 to $70,000, simply because the conversation wasn't had. Because the big thing is, you think that your children love your things. I thought my son loved everything too, Doreen. And he likes the least of them. Then I'm saying, but this one is the best of them, but he likes the more contemporary. So you'll find sometimes when you talk to your family that the pieces you just knew that they would want, they don't. And the pieces that you were going to give away, they want that piece. Or one sister loved this one because it was in her room or near her room in the hall. So these are the kind of things that you need to sort through before deciding to do anything. When you give to a museum, so many times, or HBC in particular, we're going to go there, HBC, most times they don't have enough money to care for the pieces. So while it's a generous and wonderful thing to give them a lot of art, it's also very important. Conservation, preservation, storage, whatever you can do in that arena, I think is very important, because a lot of them will just go ahead and take it. You're an alumni, they love you, you give big donations, but I go to many storage places, behind the wall, over there, leaky ceiling, and there's your piece. So be generous, but be practical as well. The 8283 that you've heard so much about, this is it. And it's a simple document, actually. Your name goes on the first line on both pages. And the part that I fill out is part 1, section 5. And it will say description of donated property. If you need more space, well, I'll put in there African American art. And in section B, I will say see appraisal. And in section C, that all-important number of the total amount of the appraisal will go in that last section. I will also fill out part 3, declaration of the appraiser, and give all of my certification information and identifying number. Then you will note at the bottom, part 4, you must get it signed also by the institution in which you're giving it to. I generally generate this form. I'll be the first to sign off because I'll have the information about the evaluation. I'll give it back to you, or if you want, I can send it to the institution. They will sign off, and then on to your accountant. I guess for me, in closing, the important thing for me is that the decisions are made before you get to me. That is just key to it. All of us and everybody understands, we all got processes here in the accountant, but the biggest process is with you. What do you really want? Talk to the people, go to your HBCU. Do they really want the piece? Does the museum, in a lot of museums, are contemporary museums, and people who walk in there with 18th century art, and it's a wonderful piece, but it doesn't fit their mission and their purpose. So understand and investigate and research you know, the proper place for it to go? Do they have the scholars that can do the work on it? Sometimes you need to be given it to institutions that they can do research and use the painting for educational purposes. Historical information. Sometimes art, you know, is needed just to tell the story in a historical way. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and frankly, I do believe that you need to be walked through the process. And many times the gallerist is the person that you meet or you deal with the most. You mostly don't see us. We're the behind the scenes people. And the gallerist can help walk you through the process and introduce you to the people. You know, most of the people that I deal with in the States don't come directly to me. I get them through either the lawyer, the gallerist, the museum refers them. But that's the first part, is what do I really want to do? And I really will say to you, as a person who grew up in Orlando, Florida, you know, we did pretty good down there, and I've done pretty good up here, and always considered myself a middle-class person, and I still do consider myself that, and am. And most of you are at least middle class or upper class in terms of financial assets. This is an asset base, and you need to treat it like you would any other asset. You don't buy a Mercedes-Benz and don't insure it. You don't buy a Mercedes-Benz and not detail it. Everything that goes with purchasing of the art, the responsibility of it is just as serious as it is with the Mercedes-Benz. So the thought, you know, collecting is great, but I have people who have 5 pieces that are fabulous, well taken care of, and goes to institutions and is, you know, handled very well. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality and taking care. These artists did most of this art at a time when so much was against them, and they told us the story, and we're still learning from them. And I just think we all have a responsibility to be more careful about the way we handle what we've been so privileged to get.